Hi, I'm Kevin Raybold, and I'm a turkey call maker. I've been making turkey calls and other game calls since 1992. Um, well, as far as a mentor, direct mentor, no. I learned how to make turkey calls from a magazine that back in 1983, a magazine that showed how to make a box call, and it actually showed how to make the what they call the Neil Cost style box call. Well, I started out making box calls. This is my personal hunting call. You can see I got some notches in there from turkeys. I record turkeys that I've killed. I started out making box calls, and then I started making wing bone calls. Actually, this is the first wing bone that I ever made. I made it before I ever killed a turkey. This was scavenged from a coyote kill. Even has some tooth holes in it and things like that. And over the years, I went on to make a lot of different kind of calls: slate calls, trumpet calls, and I even advanced into goose calls, deer calls, and turkey calls. Even weird things like a woodchuck whistle and things like that. Well, the magazine that inspired me was from 1983, but it was quite a few years that I had that. I began making calls, I believe, in 1992, and that's when I started my call company, Buffalo Hunter Game Calls. I've made approximately 230 box calls. I don't make many because I'm kind of creative, so I make them kind of fancy. I put a little extra time in them. And other calls, various calls, deer calls, slate calls, and duck and goose calls. I've probably made several hundred of different variety of calls. Um, Neil Cost, who is probably the preeminent, he's passed away now many years, but probably the preeminent custom call maker and influenced a lot of people. He said the best woods for box calls were mahogany, poplar, and cedar. If I could presume to add one more in there, I'd say American chestnut. I don't think I've ever made a bad sounding call out of American chestnut. Well, I would say that most likely every call you get is tuned by the maker and really doesn't need much more than that. I could add that sometimes you get a little bit of chalk buildup and you might want to take that out. I would say a medium sandpaper, but you don't want to sand it. You just want to clean it a tiny bit. If your call isn't sounding all that great, let me I just happen to have this really nice Red Ranger Swiss Army knife here. And let's see, where is the. Okay. Your call should ride right at the apex of the the radius on the box right there, and it should ride right across there like that. Sometimes if it's off a little bit, you might want to turn it by turning the screw a little bit, and that causes the lid to ride at a different point on the box radius. It definitely changes the sound, and being that this is a handmade call, you have to get the perfect sound on both sounding boards. So you might want to turn it a little, but I wouldn't turn it much more than what I wouldn't move it much more than what the call maker originally had it, because he tuned it the way he thought was best when he made it. Well, if you're just starting out making calls, I would say that, plan on making a few that sound bad in the beginning, and most people do. For looking for help, one of the things I did was I got Making Box Calls, The Legacy of Neil Gobbler Cost. Now, this is an old VCR tape. They definitely do them on DVD now. And this is produced by the Georgia chapter of the National Wild Turkey Federation, and I bet they still sell them today. It's a very good guide to making box calls. Also, there are some books out there, the Branton Berryhill series, that teach making box calls. You can find them on eBay, but they're quite pricey. They're rare. Yeah, I would say stick to it and expect that the first few calls you make probably won't sound the greatest. There's a learning curve. Well, I think turkey hunting has changed. I think in the early days, back in the early 90s, they seemed to gobble a lot more. Now it seems like they'll gobble on the roost, but they're kind of quiet on the ground. And they used to gobble a lot more when they were coming in. Now I think I call in more silent birds than ever before. Well, other types of calls I make, believe it or not, goose box calls. I make two different kinds. This is my little one. That's a goose call. I made this duck call out of wood that I got out of a beaver dam. I make duck calls, goose calls. And I also make, this is a turkey call. I call it the agate pot, made out of agate. Actually, it's a soft call. Oh, I'm sorry. and I make a friction deer call.